Night, page 12. Some 2 weeks before Shavat, a sunny spring day, people strolled seemingly carefree through the crowded streets. They exchanged cheerful greetings, children played games, even hazelnuts on the sidewalks. Some schoolmates and I were in Ezra Malik's garden studying Talmudic treatises. Night fell. Some 20 people had gathered in our courtyard. My father was sharing some anecdotes and holding forth on his opinion of the situation. He was a good storyteller. Suddenly, the gate opened, and Stern, a former shopkeeper, who was now a policeman, entered and took my father aside. Despite the growing darkness, I could see my father turn pale. "What's wrong?" we asked. "I don't know. I have been summoned to a special meeting of the council. Something must have happened." The story he had interrupted would remain unfinished. "I'm going right now," he said. "I'll return as soon as possible. I'll tell you everything. Wait for me." We were ready to wait as long as necessary. The courtyard turned into something like an antechamber to an operating room. We stood, waiting for the door to open. Neighbors, hearing the rumors, had joined us. We stared at our watches. Time had slowed down. What was the meaning of such a long session? "I have a bad feeling," my mother said. "This afternoon I saw 2 new faces in the ghetto. 2 German officers. I believe they were the Gestapo. Since we've been here, we've not seen a single officer." It was close to midnight. Nobody felt like going to sleep, though some people briefly went to check on their homes. Others left but asked to be called as soon as my father returned. At last, the door opened and he appeared. His face was drained of color. He quickly surrounded us. Tell us what was happening. Say something." At that moment, we were so anxious to hear something encouraging, a few words telling us that there was nothing to worry about, that the meeting had been routine, just a few of the welfare and health problems. But one glance at my father's face left no doubt. "The news is terrible," he said at last. And then, one word: transports. The ghetto was to be liquidated entirely. Departures were to take place street by street, starting the next day. We wanted to know everything, every detail. We were stunned, yet we wanted to fully absorb the bitter news. Where will they take us? That was a secret for all except one, the president of the Jewish Council. He would not tell us, or could not tell us. The Gestapo had threatened to shoot him if he talked. "There are rumors," my father said, his voice breaking, "that we are being taken somewhere in Hungary to look for the brick factories. It seems that here we are too close to the front." After a moment's silence, he added, "Each of us will be allowed to bring his personal belongings, a backpack, some food, a few items of clothing, nothing else." Again, heavy silence. "Go and wake the neighbors," said my father. "They must get ready." The shadows surrounding me roused themselves as if from a deep sleep and left silently in every direction. For a moment, we remained alone. Suddenly, Badi Aresh, a relative who lived with us, entered the room. "Someone is knocking at the sealed window, the one that faces outside." It was only after the war that I found out who had knocked that night. It was an inspector of the Hungarian police, a friend of my father's. Before we entered the ghetto, he told us, "Don't worry, I'll warn you if there's danger." Had he been able to speak to us that night, we might still have been able to flee. But by the time we succeeded in opening the window, it was too late. There was nobody outside. The ghetto was awake. One after the other, the lights were going on behind the windows. I went into the house of one of my father's friends. I woke the head of the household, a man with a gray beard and the gaze of a dreamer. His back was hunched over from untold nights spent studying. "Get up, sir, get up. You must ready yourself for the journey. Tomorrow you will be expelled, you and your family, and all the other Jews. Where to? Please don't ask me, sir. Don't ask questions. God alone could answer you. For heaven's sake, get up." He had no idea what I was talking about. He probably thought I had lost my mind. "What are you saying? Get ready for the journey. What journey? Why? What's happening? Have you gone mad?" Half asleep, he was staring at me, his eyes filled with terror, as though he expected me to burst out laughing and tell him that nothing had happened. It was all in jest. My throat was dry, and the words were choking me, paralyzing my lips. There was nothing to say. At last he understood. He got out of bed and began to dress, automatically. Then he went over to the bed where his wife lay, sleeping, and with infinite tenderness touched her forehead. She opened her eyes, and it seemed to me that a smile crossed her lips. Then he went to wake his 2 children. They woke with a start, torn from their dreams. I fled. Time went by quickly. It was already 4 o'clock in the morning. My father was running right and left, exhausted, consoling friends, checking with Jewish counsel, just in case the order had been rescinded. To the last moment, people clung to hope. The women were boiling eggs, roasting meat, preparing steaks, sewing backpacks. The children were wandering about aimlessly, not knowing what to do with themselves to stay out of the way of the grown-ups. Our backyard looked like a marketplace. Valuable objects, precious rugs, silver candlesticks, Bibles, and other ritual objects were strewn over the dusty grounds. Pitiful relics that seemed never have had a home. All this under the magnificent blue sky. By 8 o'clock in the morning, weariness had settled into our veins, our limbs, our brains, like molten lead. It was in the midst of prayer when suddenly there was shouting in the streets. I quickly unwound my phylacteries and ran to the window. Hungarian police had entered the ghetto and were yelling in the street nearby. "All Jews outside! Hurry!" They were followed by the Jewish police who, their voices breaking, told us, "The time has come. You must leave all this." The Hungarian police used their rifle butts, their clubs, in order to indiscriminately strike old men and women, children and cripples. One by one, the houses emptied and the streets filled with people carrying bundles. By 10 o'clock, everyone was outside. The police were taking roll calls, once, twice, 20 times. The heat was oppressive. Sweat streamed from people's faces and bodies. Children were crying for water. Water! There was water close by, inside the houses, the backyards, but it was forbidden to break rank. "Water, Mother, I'm thirsty." Some of the Jewish police surreptitiously went to fill a few jugs. My sisters and I were still allowed to move about, as we were destined for the last convoy, and so we helped as best we could.